It's important for your students to know what role they're playing in the orchestra at any given time. And this typically changes throughout a piece of music. Sometimes a section has melody, then they have harmony or some sort of rhythmic function. And so this fluidity of passing the melody around and passing the harmonies around can create confusion. Do students understand where they have the melody and where they have harmonies, how they're functioning in the ensemble at any given time? You can break it down by phrase or by section and you can tell them, but the goal is to start to give them an intuition as to what part they have and let that discover it for themselves. The other obstacle is when a group of students have the melody, do they know how to bring out that melody? Do they know how to go from background to foreground and cut through the sound of the ensemble and get their sound to the foreground? You know, as a director, you can say, play louder, more bow, more bow. And it may be that they're not using enough bow. Oftentimes it is. It may be that they're not using enough pressure or grip. But it could just be bow placement and not playing close enough to the bridge to get that sound to penetrate. When a student doesn't have the melody, are they playing too heavy? Are they using too much bow? You know, we can try to hold back, but eventually that starts to degrade the tone. And so is there a way that we can play a little higher, closer to the fingerboard, so that we can create more of a round blending sound? And again, this is a fluid process. It's going to depend a lot on where the melody is and where your strengths and weaknesses are in that orchestra. And some students are great in supporting lines and rhythmic lines and harmonic lines, but when they have the melody, they just kind of don't know what to do with it because they've developed their technique in order to blend. And this is typically our second violinists, our violists, our bass players. You know, our first violins and cellists typically know what to do because they have a lot more melody and they get used to playing it, and they get used to playing the techniques that are involved in playing those melodies. So what I like to do is just have my students discover it for themselves. So I'll just pull the orchestra and say, who thinks they have the melody here? And often nobody's hand will go up and I will say, hey, nobody has the melody? That's kind of weird. And there's some pieces where it's sort of amelodic. Some like minimalistic pieces and stuff, but we don't play a whole lot of that. And usually there's a melody somewhere, we just have to figure out where it is. And so what I'll do is I'll have each section play whatever part they have, and we'll just ask ourselves, does that sound like melody? And usually after listening to everybody's part, they can kind of figure out what's going on. And I like this exercise because it gets them to listen to everything, and I think that's important for balance and blend, and I think it's important for developing other tools too, like intonation and definitely tone quality. But when you're breaking it down for them, when you put all the pieces back together, then they're going to have an easier job listening because they have heard it in isolation. So through this process of dissection and isolating each part, the students will begin to develop that intuition. They'll begin to be able to look at their part and say, well, this obviously looks like melody, or this obviously looks like harmony, and they'll start to listen around to hear what else is going on, and then they'll start to get this innate ability to balance and blend on their own, which is what you want to go for because, you know, there's a lot of things to work on. You have a limited amount of time, and you would like your students to be able to start to make adjustments on their own. Another trick that you can do is just write out the melody for a particular passage. If a section's having difficulty, bring that melody out, or even performing it technically, just write it out for everybody to play, and everybody can play it at the same time. And then a section that is more comfortable in playing a supporting role or a harmony role, they'll have the opportunity to play it with some of the stronger sections, and they'll build more confidence so that when they play it on their own, they're going to naturally project and play with a more confident sound. But part of the process of balance and blend shouldn't be just the teacher or the conductor playing with the orchestra like a DJ on a mixing board, bring this out and lower this and whatever. The musicians, you know, the students in your group, they need to start learning how to do this independently. And if you always give them the answer, I feel like they won't develop that intuition on their own. And the more that they can take responsibility for, the better.